Growing up, I always knew I was different. My family, the Morellis, were practically royalty in our little corner of upstate New York. Generations of restaurateurs, with my dad, Tony, 65, ruling our traditional Italian place with an iron fist. Mom, 60, managed the staff with a smile that could melt butter, and my brother, Marco, 38, was the golden child, groomed from birth to inherit the Morelli legacy. Me? I was the outlier. I craved the quiet rustle of leaves, not the clatter of dishes. While Marco was learning the secrets of marinara sauce, I was at Grandma Lucia's, my hands buried in the rich soil of her sprawling garden. She taught me about companion planting, the delicate dance of bees and blossoms, the way a single seed could burst forth with life. But family expectations were like vines, slowly choking my dreams. I went to business school, landed a six-figure job as a senior claims adjuster at Liberty Mutual, and even snagged a condo in Manhattan with a view that screamed success. On paper, I was living the American dream, the one my parents proudly displayed like a trophy. Yet, every morning, staring at accident reports felt like slow suffocation. My escape? The neglected rooftop of our office building. I transformed it into a secret garden, a tiny oasis amidst the concrete jungle. Coworkers called me crazy for spending my savings on soil and planters, but those stolen moments among the herbs and flowers were the only times I truly breathed. Grandma Lucia's garden remained my sanctuary. Her weathered hands, guiding mine as we planted bulbs, her voice whispering, "You feel it too, don't you, Kara? That connection to the earth. It's a gift." I did feel it, a pull as strong as the roots beneath our feet. And then, one Thanksgiving, amidst the aroma of roasted turkey and simmering family tensions, I finally found my voice. "I'm going back to school," I announced, my hands trembling as I clutched the acceptance letter from the New York Botanical Garden. The silence was deafening. Dad's face turned the color of marinara, Mom's fork clattered to her plate, and Marco, ever the charmer, choked back laughter. "Going to become a real gardener now, huh? Lost your mind, sis?" My voice shook, but I held my ground. "I've enrolled in the landscape design program. I've already resigned." Dad slammed his fist. "If you do this, don't expect any help from us." Only Grandma Lucia remained calm. Her gaze settled on my father, her voice firm. "Tony, when was the last time you were truly happy doing something you didn't choose for yourself?" Part 2. Grandma Lucia's wisdom. The day after that Thanksgiving explosion, I fled to Grandma Lucia's. The November air was crisp, but she was out in her garden, pruning roses in her faded blue apron, pockets overflowing with tools and twine. "They don't understand, Grandma," I confessed, my voice thick with unshed tears. "They think I'm throwing my life away." She set down her shears and looked at me, her eyes wise and knowing. "Your parents want what's best for you, Kara, but they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants, in the earth itself. You have a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it." She led me to her greenhouse, a haven of warmth and humidity. Delicate orchids bloomed in clay pots, ferns unfurled their emerald wings. She pointed to a small, struggling orchid. "Look at this one. Everyone said it was beyond saving, but I knew better. Sometimes the most beautiful things take time to reveal themselves, just like you, my dear." Her words were a balm to my soul. That winter, I started classes at the New York Botanical Garden. I traded my Manhattan view for a cramped Bronx apartment with a tiny balcony, my corporate wardrobe for jeans and muddy boots. Landscape design wasn't just about pretty flowers, it was about understanding the language of the land, the intricate dance of form and function. Rachel, a classmate with fiery red hair and a laugh that could fill a greenhouse, became my confidant. "You should see your face when you're designing," she'd say. "It's like you're finally speaking your native language." Family dinners became a battlefield. I'd sit at the bar, exiled from the family table, while Marco rattled on about restaurant renovations, and Mom slipped me job postings with pitying smiles. 6 months in, I entered a small garden design competition. My concept, focused on sustainable urban spaces, surprisingly won first place. I excitedly shared the news at Sunday dinner, hoping for a flicker of approval. Dad barely glanced up from his plate. "That's nice, honey. But when are you going to get serious about your life?" Marco, ever subtle, chimed in. "Maybe you can design a garden for the restaurant's dumpster. Class it up a bit." Mom, bless her heart, offered, "Liberty Mutual would probably take you back if you apologized." That night, tears blurring my vision, I called Grandma Lucia. "Your father was the same way when he started the restaurant," she revealed. "His father wanted him to be a lawyer. Now look at him, so convinced his way is the only way. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, Kara." Months turned into a year. My skills grew, small commissions trickled in, my container gardens were featured in a local blog, but my family remained unmoved. Dad changed the subject whenever my work came up. Marco's gardener jabs grew sharper. Then came the news that shattered my world. Grandma Lucia, my rock, my mentor, was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Within weeks, she was gone. I clung to her words, whispered in a hospital room filled with the scent of lilies. "Don't forget to plant the bulbs deep enough. And remember, Kara, you're doing exactly what you were meant to do." Grandma Lucia's passing left a gaping hole in my life. But amidst the grief, a surprising development emerged. She'd left me her entire house and garden, a property worth a fortune. Dad, who'd been eyeing that land for years, practically choked on his espresso. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "She's going to turn it into some hippie garden center." Marco, never one to miss an opportunity for a dig, added, "Great, now she can really play gardener in her own little kingdom." His fiancée, Isabella, a woman whose perfectly manicured nails had probably never touched soil, smirked alongside him. But there was a catch to the inheritance. I had to maintain and develop the garden according to Grandma Lucia's vision. She'd left detailed plans, journals filled with sketches and notes, even designs for showcasing sustainable landscaping. I poured my heart and soul into that garden. I collaborated with local conservation groups, nurtured rare plants, and channeled Grandma Lucia's spirit with every seed I sowed. Word spread, and soon, a renowned gardening magazine contacted me, wanting to feature the renovation in their Heritage Gardens series. Then came Marco's wedding. The invitation reeked of extravagance, thick cream paper embossed with gold, a testament to Isabella's wealthy family. I decided to attend, not to impress, but to honor the memory of my grandmother. I wore a simple but elegant dress, a splurge from my competition winnings, a silent declaration of my own success. The ceremony was opulent, held at the most expensive venue in town, with Marco making sure everyone knew he'd footed the bill, though I later learned Dad had discreetly contributed a hefty sum. The reception, however, was where the real drama unfolded. Despite being immediate family, I was seated at table 23, practically in the kitchen. My place card even read "The Gardener" instead of my name. Isabella, with a practiced air of condescension, introduced me to her friends. "And this is Marco's sister. The one who, what was it again? Plants flowers or something?" Her friends tittered behind their champagne flutes. But karma, as they say, has a way of blooming when you least expect it. The venue's renowned event planner, a woman with an eye for talent and a subscription to that very gardening magazine, recognized me. She practically gushed, "Your sustainable garden designs are revolutionary. I've been following your renovation project on Instagram." Then, Isabella's uncle, the mayor, took the microphone. He'd seen my work on the city's new Sustainable Parks project and proceeded to praise my innovative designs to the entire room. Suddenly, those society ladies who'd been snickering were staring at me with newfound interest. Dad and Marco sat frozen, their faces thunderous. After the speech, I was swarmed. Isabella's relatives, owners of sprawling estates, wanted to discuss garden designs. The head of the city's Parks and Recreation Department mentioned they were looking for someone just like me for a major urban renewal project. The next day, Mom called, her voice hesitant. "I saw the magazine article. The photographs are beautiful. You've really made something special." Dad and Marco remained silent, but I noticed the restaurant's website now boasted about their family connection to sustainable urban design. Ironic, considering they still hadn't congratulated me on anything, but the wind had shifted. I was meeting with the Parks Department next week. It would be my biggest commission yet, and the proposed site, right next to my father's restaurant. Life, just like Grandma Lucia said, has a funny way of coming full circle. It's been 3 months since my last update, and the momentum hasn't slowed. The urban renewal project next to the restaurant is attracting national attention. Design magazines are featuring those vertical gardens, and a prominent environmental organization has nominated the project for their annual Innovation Award. This publicity has generated a surprising amount of interest in my father's restaurant, but not in the way he initially intended. People are coming specifically to see the innovative restaurant with the amazing herb garden designed by the gardener-turned-architect. Food critics are raving about the harmonious blend of culinary and horticultural expertise. Last month, a documentary crew contacted me, wanting to feature the project in a series about urban transformation. They were intrigued by the family narrative, the restaurateur's daughter who revolutionized urban gardening. The producer wanted to film at both my design studio and the restaurant. My father, basking in the reflected glory, couldn't refuse without looking petty, especially with local business organizations praising the project's positive impact. Even Food Wine magazine wants to do a feature on the culinary garden connection. During filming, the producer asked my father about his initial opposition to my career change. The camera caught his uncomfortable squirming as he mumbled, "Well, we just wanted what was best for her." The next day, I had an unexpected visitor at my studio. My father stood there, looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. He held a worn, leather-bound book, his original recipe journal from when he first started the restaurant. "Your grandmother," he said quietly. "She was the only one who supported me when I wanted to open this place. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. He said cooking was beneath our family." He placed the recipe book on my desk. I became exactly like him, didn't I? Trying to force my children into the life I thought they should have. The restoration of their herb garden had expanded into a full rooftop garden, supplying 80% of their produce. The waiting list for garden view tables stretched for months. Food critics praised the farm-to-table synergy, and the restaurant's Instagram was exploding with photos of the vertical gardens. Even Marco had to acknowledge the change. During a recent business meeting, yes, they now schedule official meetings with me, he admitted through gritted teeth that their revenue had increased by 40% since the garden renovation. Isabella, ever the chameleon, underwent a remarkable transformation after her mother appointed me the official landscape architect for their country club renovation. Suddenly, she was telling everyone how she always knew there was something special about her sister-in-law's connection with nature. The final piece fell into place last week. The city's sustainability board, impressed with the urban renewal project, proposed a major expansion. They wanted to create a green corridor connecting several local businesses, with my father's restaurant as the centerpiece. The catch? The restaurant would need to convert their remaining parking lot into a demonstration garden. My father called an emergency family meeting, a real one this time, not just a dinner where they talked over me. For the first time, I sat at the head of the table in the restaurant's private dining room. "We need your help," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. Not just as a consultant, as a partner. They wanted to create a joint venture, combining the restaurant and my design studio into an integrated culinary and horticultural experience center. My father even suggested renaming it to include my professional name. Marco, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon, presented the financial projections. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Even he had to admit that my gardening hobby had blossomed into a significant business opportunity. Mom pulled out an old photo she'd kept hidden all these years. Me at 6 years old, proudly showing off my first tomato plant in Grandma Lucia's garden. "We should have seen it then," she said softly. "You were never meant for a corporate office. The integration of our businesses is well underway." The restaurant's new logo features an elegant herb leaf design. The menu proudly declares, "From our garden to your table," with each dish listing the specific garden location of its ingredients. Last week, a national magazine included our project in their Top 10 Innovative Family Businesses list. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when they specifically praised how the second-generation restaurateur family embraced their daughter's vision to revolutionize urban dining. Grandma Lucia's garden, where it all began, has become a teaching center for sustainable urban agriculture. The waiting list for workshops is months long, and we're partnering with local schools for educational programs. The biggest surprise: Dad has started spending his mornings in the garden before the restaurant opens. I recently caught him carefully tending the herbs, wearing one of our branded garden aprons. He looked more peaceful than I'd ever seen him. Remember how they used to mock me as the gardener at family gatherings? Now, the host greets customers with, "Welcome to Garden Table, where the gardener's vision meets culinary excellence." Yesterday, I received a letter that brought tears to my eyes. It was from a high school student who attended one of our gardening workshops. She wrote about how seeing my story in the documentary inspired her to stand up to her parents, who wanted her to become a doctor when her true passion was environmental science. The letter included a sketch of a garden design she created, remarkably similar to my early drawings in Grandma Lucia's journals. I've invited her to intern with us this summer, launching our first youth mentorship program. This whole experience has taught me something profound about family legacies. Sometimes, honoring your family's legacy doesn't mean following the path they laid out, but rather expanding that path to include new possibilities. My father built a restaurant that brought people together over good food. I added gardens that connect them to the earth that nourishes not just their bodies, but their souls. To everyone who supported me through this journey on Reddit, thank you. Your encouragement helped me stay strong when my own family couldn't see my worth. Special thanks to those who shared similar stories of following their dreams despite family opposition. You helped me realize I wasn't alone. For anyone facing similar challenges, stay true to your path. Sometimes, the very thing your family mocks becomes the key to transforming not just your life, but theirs as well. And remember, like Grandma Lucia always said, life has a funny way of coming full circle. Story 2. I need help on how to deal with my parents' attempts to re-establish contact with me, as I am 42 years old. They are in their early 70s. I'll attempt to describe everything correctly, but the narrative is convoluted, and to be honest, writing this makes my hands shake. My parents were quite judgmental of anything I accomplished as a child. For them, nothing was ever good enough. They wanted to know why it wasn't a plus if I received an A. Instead of applauding me when I placed second in a high school state art competition, they spoke about why I hadn't won first place the whole way home in the car. They would complain that it wasn't practical enough if I took up a pastime. When I joined the school photography club, I recall my father giving me a 3-hour lecture about how I was squandering time that might have been used to prepare for the SAT. Under the pretense that they wanted the best for me, they had complete control over my life. It wasn't until college that I was permitted to dress whatever I pleased. My mother said that I lacked a sense of proper dress, therefore she insisted on purchasing everything. They had me major in business instead of graphic design because they believed that artists would always be impoverished. They even made an effort to pick my pals, continuously berating everybody I brought home for being unworthy or a negative influence. They treat me like a show pony at family get-togethers, boasting about my accomplishments while also pointing out my shortcomings. I was grounded by my parents for turning family against them after my aunt informed me she was unhappy with the way they treated me. When I started my first work at a marketing agency as an adult, the trend persisted. When I moved into my first flat, they asked me why I hadn't applied to more prominent firms. Because they knew better, they frequently moved my furniture when they unexpectedly dropped by every weekend to see how I was doing. I married 44-year-old James when I was 33. He appeared well prepared and hailed from a wealthy family. In retrospect, my parents' approval of him should have been a red flag. They admired his family's social standing, his esteemed position at a financial company, and most importantly, the fact that he appeared to share all of their opinions about what constitutes a decent life. He was personable, focused, and appeared to understand me in a way that no one else did during our relationship. In retrospect, I see that he was only reflecting my fears and wants. However, It was like a switch was flicked inside of him as soon as we were married. At first, the adjustments were little. A few remarks about how my attire is too skimpy for a married woman, ideas that I ought to prepare more elaborate dinners, criticism of my unladylike chuckle is welcome. Then everything got out of hand. Saying that married spouses shouldn't have secrets, he started listening in on my phone conversations. Despite the fact that I was spending my own money, he questioned every purchase I made. If I went out with friends, he would get upset and accuse me of ignoring our marriage. Over time, the emotional manipulation grew increasingly severe. He would give me the silent treatment for days when I accomplished something at work if I didn't agree with him. He would minimize it by implying that my success was all due to my attractiveness to my male coworkers. I was often apologizing for things I hadn't done, since he had a knack of making every disagreement feel like my fault. He started using physical threats as a control mechanism. Although he never struck me, he would stand over me and shout, hurl items close to me but not at me, and pound walls during arguments. Every day I felt like I had to tread carefully. The worst thing about him was that, especially in social situations, he could go from anger to charm in a second, which caused me to doubt how I saw the world. I understand that some of you may be wondering why I stayed with him as soon as I noticed these warning signs. However, I was young, and emotional abuse can be sneaky. It's only when you're drowning that you realize you're in trouble. I had very little idea what a good relationship looked like. My typical meter had been totally distorted by my parents' domineering behavior. I persuaded myself that James was simply experiencing difficulties and was unsure of how to manage his feelings. I believed that things would go better if I could simply be a better wife, more sympathetic, more understanding. After 3 years of marriage, I started surreptitiously visiting a therapist. I utilized my lunch breaks at work and paid in cash since I was terrified James would find out. After months of treatment, I finally realized that what I was going through wasn't typical or appropriate. The therapist helped me see how my parents' domineering behavior had prepared the ground for my marriage, and how my background had left me open to abuse of James's kind. I meticulously planned my escape for 6 months. I reconnected with old acquaintances, collected vital papers, and gradually accumulated a separate savings account. James had cut me off. I began telling my parents the truth about James's actions in the hopes that they would support me. I should have known better in retrospect. They always found a way to make me feel horrible about James's actions whenever I informed them about them, rather than standing by me. Their response was heartbreaking when I eventually turned to them for assistance. They became upset with me, accusing me of being immature for ending my marriage, and telling me that I should endure it as divorce was a disgrace. In fact, according to my mother, there are issues in every marriage. Simply put, you're too sensitive. According to my father, James may not be so irritated if I had been a more conventional wife. However, they told James where I was staying, which was the worst thing they did. I had intended to remain with them for 2 weeks while I started the divorce process. I didn't want James to know where I was, since I knew he would probably become agitated if I stayed at our place, and I reasoned that at least my parents would be there to shield me from his harm. However, after only 3 days of my stay, they phoned James to inform him of my whereabouts and invite him to visit at any moment. I resolve conflicts via dialogue. They put me in grave danger, but they believed they were assisting in our reconciliation. James arrived at their home that evening. Fortunately, he did not get violent. He basically cried for hours on end, pleading with me to come back and that he would change. The last straw, though, was seeing my parents support him and nod in agreement as he portrayed himself as the victim. I knew I couldn't rely on them in any way. I left their house that night and ended up staying with a buddy from work who understood my circumstances. The following several months were tremendously trying. I seldom spoke to my parents, but they still called often to remind me how foolish I was for continuing with the divorce. They sent flying monkeys, relatives, and family friends to guilt-trip me about killing my family. They stopped communicating altogether when the divorce was finalized. No texts, no calls, not even cards for the holidays. It seemed as though I had vanished. I was initially devastated. I wept for months over the thought that I had been abandoned by my own parents. I would check my phone for messages that never arrived when I woke up in the middle of the night. Every birthday and holiday seemed like a brand new injury, but after a while, I understood that I couldn't think about it indefinitely. I had to start over in my life. The years that followed were difficult, yet revolutionary. After relocating to a different location and beginning rigorous therapy, I was able to get over my parents' desertion and James's abuse. I gained knowledge about good relationships, limits, and self-worth. I put forth a great deal of effort to launch my profession in graphic design, something I had always loved but had been dissuaded from doing. Finally, being able to pursue my ambitions without someone telling me I wasn't good enough was freeing. Slowly but slowly, things began to improve. I developed sincere friendships with those that welcomed me for who I am. I regained confidence in my own judgment. I even began to appreciate the little things, like picking out clothes or decorating my flat, without having to listen to my inner critics. I met my spouse, Nathan, at 46 a.m., around 2 years ago. He's helpful, nice, and everything. James wasn't. He shown sincere interest in my job and my viewpoints from the first date. He never made an effort to alter or dominate me. He was gentle and kind when I informed him about my history. He has a 10-year-old daughter, Lily, from a prior relationship, and witnessing him be such a caring, supporting parent has helped heal some of my own childhood traumas. We've formed a great little family together. I share a unique relationship with Lily. My parents would have thought it was a waste of time for us to spend weekends working on creative projects. I'm learning how to view the world differently thanks to her. Additionally, I'm discovering the true sensation of unconditional love. A few months ago, Nathan and I were married in a tiny, private ceremony. That's precisely what we desired. For the first time, life feels secure and content. Right now, this is the reason I'm here today. A documentary exposing financial and emotional abuse in our neighborhood was released approximately a month ago by a local filmmaker. James was one of the main case studies in the movie. I didn't know why he was in this documentary at all, because I hadn't followed his activities since our divorce. I was appalled when I saw that. The video described how he had defrauded individuals out of thousands of dollars and emotionally and financially exploited a number of women in dubious business dealings. Although I was aware that James had the potential to abuse partners, I never imagined that his behavior would serve as a warning to the entire community. Anyone who knew James could tell it was him, since the details were so exact, even though the filmmaker didn't use his true name. Other women who had suffered from similar abuse patterns, charm, control, isolation, and emotional manipulation, were interviewed for the documentary. It was similar to seeing my own experience mirrored in several mirrors. My phone was inundated with messages from old friends and acquaintances after the program aired, saying things like, "Wow, you really dodged a bullet, and I can't believe you went through that." That's how I initially learnt about the documentary. The biggest shock occurred when my parents reached out, even though I was happy that James's true nature was finally being revealed, and that I was finally receiving the pity I had earned years before. My mother first sent me a lengthy, heartfelt text message expressing her regret for not trusting me. She expressed her regret for not protecting me, and how the documentary opened her eyes. My parents then left voicemails expressing their sincere regret for how they had treated me, and their want to get back in touch. I'm not sure how to react to this. If I said that their messages had no impact on me, I would be lying. After all, they are my parents, and I still have a juvenile need for their affection and acceptance. However, I will never forget the way they treated me when I was at my lowest. I will never forget how they endangered me in order to uphold their views on marriage and divorce. Understanding that their domineering behavior had prepared me for an abusive relationship took years of therapy, and developing healthy boundaries and self-worth took even longer. They've tried to reach me, but I haven't replied. I've simply been sitting there reading their texts over and over again while holding my phone. I'm experiencing a range of feelings that I can't quite identify. I feel like it's okay to ignore them. They are only getting in touch with me now because they are embarrassed by how foolish they were to leave me when I most needed them. However, I also feel that I ought to give them a chance. People can change, after all. This has been keeping me up at night. Although Nathan has been very encouraging and has stated that he would support me in any decision I make, I can see the worry in his eyes. He is concerned that my parents could upend the tranquil life we have created, since he is aware of how much they have harmed me. I'm also worried about Lily's reaction to their presence. She shouldn't be exposed to the unhealthy relationships I had growing up. I shouldn't feel awful about cutting them off, according to my therapist, but it's not that easy. Though I'm not sure whether I'd regret not listening to them, I'm also not sure if I'll ever be able to trust them again. I don't want those terrible days to reopen old scars because I've gone so far since then. However, I'm not sure whether I'm being overly obstinate. After everything my parents done, is it unreasonable for me to want them out of my life? Or am I clinging to the past and being overly stubborn? Update 1. Hi everyone. Thanks to all who responded on my first post. Your viewpoints truly aided in my decision-making. Before I tell you what occurred, I should address some of the critical questions that a few of you raised. Initially, a lot of people questioned why I would even think about answering my parents. It's complicated, to be honest. I still harbor a tiny hope that they could change, even after years of treatment and recovery from their desertion. I suppose I was also worried that I might come to regret ignoring them entirely. I concluded I couldn't overlook the problem indefinitely after reading your recommendations. I reasoned that listening to them was the only way to achieve serenity. In order to avoid conflict, I decided to meet them in a little cafe that is situated midway between their town and mine. I had the hope that they would sincerely apologize for their treatment of me and that we could have an open discussion. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. They were more concerned with defending their actions than with expressing regret when I met them. My mother continued by saying that they were unaware of James's seriousness until the documentary made them realize it. As if that should justify everything, my dad claimed that they acted in accordance with their then-current moral convictions. They seemed more apologetic for their error than for the suffering they had caused me. My mother even made a suggestion that I may have handled things better at one time, and perhaps they wouldn't have misinterpreted the circumstances. That was really painful. They still managed to place part of the blame on me in spite of everything I had to endure. It dawned on me then that they had no real intention of making apologies. Their only goal was to feel better about themselves. I informed them that I was content with my life as it was, and that I didn't want to carry on the topic. I wished for things to return to their pre-contact state. We lead different lives. They attempted to argue and appeared horrified, but I left before they could persuade me to stay. It ought to have ended there. However, they then went too far for me to ignore. Lily had a school play last weekend. She had been anticipating it for weeks, and Nathan and I were quite pleased with her diligence. I was shocked to see my parents seated in the crowd, as you may understand. They must have learnt about the play via Nathan's Facebook page, because I never informed them about it. Our privacy settings have been changed. They did not just appear. As Lily's grandparents, they began introducing themselves to other parents. Perplexed, Lily asked Nathan who they were. It was such an awkward situation. My parents had to be pulled aside and told to go. My mom started weeping and said I was punishing them for their previous errors. My dad stated they were only trying to be there for me now, as if it somehow justified disrespecting my boundaries. Especially with other parents and children there, I didn't want to cause a scene. So, as quietly as possible, I requested them to go. Despite their persistent attempts to raise trouble and make things difficult, I was able to calm them down and persuade them to leave. Nathan was enraged after they departed, and to be honest, so did I. Despite his tremendous support during this entire ordeal, he believes that my parents are making the worst conceivable attempt to impose themselves on us. He was already angry with them for their prior treatment of me and their lack of genuine responsibility, right now. Additionally, he is protective of Lily and concerns that their actions may irritate or confuse her. He worries that they may begin to use her as a means of contacting me. I can absolutely see his point of view. After that, I texted my parents firmly to let them know that I needed space and that their behavior was unacceptable. I made it plain that I would be forced to break off all communication if they persisted in crossing limits. Although they haven't replied yet, I have no doubt that they will do so soon. I feel like I have every right to shield my family from this type of disruption, but I also question whether I'm being too severe. They showed they weren't prepared to respect my limits or my life when I attempted to give them a chance. I'll keep everyone informed on the following steps. Thank you for reading, and I would value any future guidance you may have. The second update. I honestly didn't anticipate returning so quickly, but everything has absolutely gone haywire. A few days prior, I received information from a family acquaintance I've been in touch with over the years that they felt I should be aware of. James had been contacted by my parents. That's right, James, my violent ex-husband, who was recently shown engaging in predatory behavior in a documentary. My acquaintance claims that my parents contacted him to find out how he felt about our divorce. I was taken aback. They felt the need to go straight to him to confirm everything, even after they had apologized and said they now believed me. Even worse, James seems to have made some arrogant comments about how I've always been challenging and ready to point the finger at others through common connections, even if he didn't directly answer them. It was like someone tearing open an old wound when I heard this. I initially believed that my buddy could have misinterpreted or been given inaccurate information. I called to double-check, trying one last time to give my parents the benefit of the doubt. My mother made no effort to refute it. Rather, she began to justify their choice, claiming that they wanted to know the whole story of what transpired in my marriage. My dad joined in on the phone and reiterated that although James's actions in the documentary were alarming, it didn't necessarily follow that he had been a horrible spouse. They even implied that they were seeking clarification and that I could have been exaggerating my difficulties at the time. It was like being slapped across the face by the total absence of regret. When I questioned whether they knew how much this hurt me and how brave I was to leave James in the first place, they said they did. My mother dismissed it, claiming that they didn't want to upset me and that I was being overly sentimental. At that time, according to my dad, they were only attempting to make well-informed decisions about mending their connection with me. All of my therapeutic progress was abruptly stopped by something inside of me. I'd done all the healing. They seemed to be attempting to discredit everything. They were manipulative, self-centered, and unable to change, I warned them. If they couldn't even admit how incredibly terrible their acts were, I told them they had no place in my life or in my family. They didn't even offer an apology. My dad muttered something about how they can never win with me, and my mom just seemed to think I was being tough again. After I hung up, I was overcome with emotion. I was upset and outraged at how they were treating me after years of no communication, but I was also relieved. I've come to the realization that I'm genuinely relieved to be able to avoid them going forward. Even though this circumstance has been terrible, it has given me some closure. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I blamed myself for the fact that I was constantly worried about how I had lost contact with my parents. However, I now realize that I was completely innocent. I can tell that they haven't changed based on their behavior. They continue to be the same domineering, deceptive individuals who prioritize their own wants and opinions over my welfare. The only thing that's changed is that I'm now strong enough to recognize it and defend myself. Nathan has been my pillar of support during this whole ordeal, and I spoke with him about everything. He was also incensed, especially considering how my parents' behavior directly affects the stability of our family. We decided after much deliberation that I had to shield our family from my parents' mayhem. As a result, I have blocked them on all social media, email, and phones. When I explained what had happened to the family friend who had warned me, they fully supported my decision to break off communication. They even expressed regret for having to deliver the bad news. In all honesty, though, I'm glad they informed me that I needed to know. I know I can't keep putting myself in situations where I'm hurt repeatedly, but it hurts to acknowledge that my parents probably won't ever be the people I need them to be. My priorities are Lily, Nathan, my family, and the life we've created together. I will not allow anyone to destroy the fact that they are my true family. Once again, I appreciate all of your help and guidance. I'm learning to advocate for myself and put the people who really matter first, even though it's been a difficult journey. The third update will be my last one. I've made the decision to permanently end my parents' meddling in my life, in light of everything that has transpired. Things took a turn for the worse, and I've had to make some difficult but important choices. The principal of Lily's school called me a few weeks ago and it made me feel extremely uneasy. My parents, who claimed to be Lily's grandparents, had contacted the school directly. They insisted they had my consent to volunteer for an impending school function. Fortunately, the school was cautious enough to get in touch with me before accepting their offer. I was appalled. They decided to disregard everything and go straight for my family after I made it clear that I didn't want anything to do with them. They knew their presence at Lily's play was unwelcome, yet they still tried to insert themselves into her school life. This made it clear they weren't going to stop unless I took serious legal action. Nathan and I decided to consult a lawyer about filing a restraining order. The process was emotionally draining. I had to recount everything from their abandonment after my divorce to their recent behavior, including their attempt to contact James and their school interference. The lawyer was confident we had a strong case and helped us file the paperwork. When my parents were served, their reaction was predictable, yet still disappointing. My mom left a rambling voicemail, crying about how I was tearing the family apart and accusing me of overreacting. My dad sent an email from a new address since I blocked his old one, accusing me of being cold-hearted and claiming I was too poisoned by Nathan's influence. They kept suggesting I was too naive to know what I was doing, and that I would regret what I was doing to them. During the legal proceedings, they tried to contest the order and did their best to disprove every piece of evidence I presented. Unfortunately for them, I had documented everything, every text, every email, every voicemail. The judge could clearly see the pattern of their behavior and granted the restraining order. The order includes provisions that prevent them from contacting me, Nathan, or Lily in any way, including through third parties. If they violate it, they'll face legal consequences to ensure we're fully protected. I've taken additional steps. I've told everyone in my life that if anyone tries to reach out to me on my parents' behalf, I'll have to cut them off immediately. Thankfully, no one has tested this boundary, and most people have been incredibly supportive since the restraining order was put in place. My parents have attempted to contact me through indirect means. They've sent letters to my old address which were forwarded to me by my mail service. I haven't opened them. I'm keeping them as evidence in case I need to prove they're still violating boundaries. This whole ordeal has been exhausting, both emotionally and physically. I've had trouble sleeping. My anxiety has been through the roof, and I've had to increase my therapy sessions. But beneath all the stress and turmoil, I feel a sense of peace I haven't experienced before. It's like I finally cut away a deceased limb that was poisoning my entire body. Nathan and I have decided to focus on moving forward. We're planning a family trip with Lily to create some positive memories and get a change of scenery. We're thinking about somewhere peaceful, maybe a beach house where we can spend quality time together without any distractions. My therapist is helping me work through the lingering guilt and hurt. She pointed out something interesting, that my parents' recent actions have actually been a gift in disguise. Their behavior has proven that I made the right decision in keeping them away from my family, and it's given me the strength to take legal action to protect my peace. Looking back, I realize that all the times they tried to control me, all the times they undermined my decisions and belittled my choices, were preparing me for this moment. Each small act of rebellion, from pursuing graphic design to leaving James, was building my strength. Now, with this legal boundary in place, I finally feel truly free. To anyone going through something similar, please know that it's okay to protect yourself, even from family. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the most necessary ones. My parents had countless chances to rebuild our relationship, and they blew every single one of them. The restraining order isn't just a legal document, it's my declaration of independence. Thank you to everyone who has supported me through this mess. Your advice and encouragement have meant the world to me. This chapter of my life is finally closed, and I'm ready to focus on the beautiful family I've built and the peaceful future ahead of us. Story 3. A few weeks ago, I gave birth to my daughter, and 2 days ago, I hosted her christening ceremony. I am a 32-year-old Amini doctor who works at a big hospital in Boston. Mom had 58. F is now upset that I didn't ask her to the ceremony or even select her as a godparent. I would want to describe the complex circumstances that resulted in this choice. After my relationship with my ex, I voluntarily became a single mother. Our hospital's 34MA cardiologist left during my pregnancy. We had what I believed to be a strong relationship, 3 years of dating and 2 years of cohabitation, after meeting during our residency. Naturally, when I found out I was pregnant, I brought up marriage. Considering our long-term partnership and steady careers, it wasn't an absurd proposal, in my opinion, but he said he needed more time to consider if he was prepared to get married. I knew I couldn't wait for him to determine if he was ready for commitment at that stage in my life, especially given my rigorous emergency medicine work. I threatened to end our relationship if he didn't propose. I'm accustomed to making fast decisions because I'm an AR doctor. Additionally, I was fully ready to be a single mother. To be honest, even before I gave him that ultimatum, I knew we were going to split up. What successful marriage, after all, begins with an ultimatum? My intuition was correct, as he moved out in a matter of weeks. After our separation, he concluded he wasn't ready for parenthood either, despite his initial insistence that he was willing to be active as a father. After consulting with my legal medicine colleagues, I enlisted the help of a lawyer, and he is currently making child support payments. He is free to come anytime he wants, but he hasn't expressed any interest in me yet, even though I have full custody. I need to focus on my cardiology fellowship right now, he said, as if I wasn't balancing pregnancy and my own medical job. However, my ex isn't the true problem. It has to do with my mother's actions during this whole ordeal. I was in an extremely bad mental state when my relationship ended at the start of my pregnancy. I knew I needed help since we medical practitioners are trained to see the symptoms of depression. Particularly during those lengthy overnight stints at the emergency room, my coworkers also took note. Families would normally help out in such circumstances, but my friends were the only ones who really stood by me. My 2 dearest pals from the time I lived there. While managing their own medical practices, Maria, 32F, another ER doctor, Kelly, and a 31FA pediatrician came to see me as much as they could. Naturally, I selected them to be the godmothers of my baby because they were the only people who were with me when I went into labor. My mother's exclusion was not a hasty choice. I had been living alone in my condo close to the hospital during my pregnancy, working additional shifts in the emergency room. In order to accumulate funds for maternity leave, working 12-hour shifts while pregnant, handling trauma cases, and juggling the physical demands of emergency care weren't easy. As my due date approached, my friends volunteered to remain with me, but I was unable to accept their offer. I foolishly relied on my mother because Kelly's hospital is distant from mine, and Maria is married with a 3-year-old boy. After she found out about my pregnancy on social media, she abruptly became more interested in my life. We weren't very close before then since she usually gave preference to my younger sister Lisa, and our family dynamics were obviously split. Dad and I were one thing, and Lisa and Mom were another. Our family barely got together for birthdays or holidays when we left for college, but at least we kept in touch. When my dad died 2 years ago after an unexpected heart attack, everything changed. I didn't miss the irony. After his funeral, I was working in the emergency room that evening, but at a different hospital. My already shaky connection with my sister and mother was all but destroyed. My mom and Lisa continued to be inseparable and often spent time together. However, there was an imperceptible barrier between us every time I saw them. I eventually came to terms with the fact that my mother valued Lisa more than I did. I found it strange that once I announced my pregnancy, my mother's behavior suddenly altered. She began to make an effort to stay in contact, would even pay a visit once in a while, and continued to express her excitement about being a grandma. I phoned her and begged her to stay with me during the latter weeks of my pregnancy, when I was experiencing excruciating back pain following especially difficult shifts in the emergency room. She said she would, but then abruptly canceled, saying she didn't feel secure leaving her house alone because of the many killings in her neighborhood. I was really disappointed, but I wasn't sure whether she was being honest. Nevertheless, I chose to handle things myself and didn't pursue the issue. But my mother was the first person I phoned when I went into labor while working the night shift at the hospital. When I informed her that I wanted her there with me, she first claimed that she was too busy to make it happen. It was 2 a.m, on a Sunday, so I was baffled by the type of obligations she would have. She eventually acknowledged that she couldn't be there because she had to be there for Lisa when I pressured her, getting more and more upset in between contractions. She couldn't remain with me during the last several weeks of my pregnancy, apparently because Lisa had moved in with her a few weeks prior. Being there for Lisa was the first priority, according to my mother, who revealed that she had recently been abandoned by her boyfriend and was in a very vulnerable state of mind. I genuinely couldn't see how being there for your grandchild's birth could be more significant than anything else. However, I was too hurt to protest. I hung up after she gave me her explanation and instead called Maria and Kelly. Maria, who works at my hospital, arrived in 15 minutes, took care of all the medical papers, and Kelly arrived right at the delivery room. They supported me the entire time, including helping me get settled for the next several days until I felt confident enough to be alone with the baby. In contrast, my mother didn't get in touch with me for a whole week following the birth of my child. Behaving as casually as if nothing had happened, she texted to ask whether she could come that day. "Hello, sweetie," was what she wrote. "I decided to visit my granddaughter today. What time is most effective?" I didn't reply since that really got under my skin. In any case, she arrived that night without warning. Until she eventually left, I acted as though I wasn't home. After that, she kept messaging and attempted contacting me many times, but I never answered. It's amazing that she never felt the need to express regret or even to admit what had occurred. She continued to act as though nothing was wrong. I'm sending things like, "I'm excited to babysit and I'm missing my grandbaby." She must have realized I was angry with her after a time, but rather than offering a clear apology, she had Lisa text me to attempt to justify what she had done. Lisa's letter began, "I'm really sorry that because of me, Mom couldn't be there when you went into labor. But you need to understand what I was going through," which just made matters worse. She went on to say she had been cheated on by someone she had been in love with for a very long time, after just 2 weeks of dating him. She apparently had a thing on a guy from her college days, but she never approached him since he was already seeing someone else. Even after graduating, she remained friends with him, maintained in touch with him, and still harbored feelings for him. After a recent breakup with his fiancée, that guy asked Lisa out 3 weeks later. After 2 weeks of dating, he told her he was not ready for another committed relationship so soon after terminating his long-term one, and that he simply wanted to be friends. He blocked her everywhere and called her insane and psychotic for taking a casual rebound so seriously when Lisa became upset and began to argue with him. Normally, I would have felt sorry for her, but Lisa is a 25-year-old woman, not a youngster going through her first breakup. He was only using her as a rebound, and she should have known it. Even worse, her friends had explicitly advised her not to approach him since they knew he had recently ended a committed relationship. I was incensed that our mother had chosen to forego the birth of her granddaughter because she couldn't cope with ending a 2-week relationship, and I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. This came after 9 whole months of feigning excitement about the baby. Everything was made worse by Lisa's reply, which demonstrated to me that neither of them could see anything wrong with their actions. I blocked them both on social media, email, and the phone. They never again tried to get in touch with me in any other way. For around a week, the baptism ceremony in the church where our family has been for centuries followed. Only a few of my close hospital co-workers, including my aunt and her godmothers, Maria and Kelly, attended the small private ceremony. My mother somehow found out about the ceremony, even though I'm certain none of these folks informed her about it. Since she knows them from her years of volunteering at the church, I have a suspicion that one of the choir women may have informed her. Their gossip was totally needless and caused a lot of turmoil, so even though I don't know who it was, I want to report them to the church administration. I was attempting to put my daughter to sleep after a particularly troublesome morning when my mother arrived to my condo the day after the baptism, after she had learnt about it. Despite my attempts to pretend I wasn't home, my mother wouldn't leave. She simply continued to ring the doorbell repeatedly. My daughter was becoming more and more upset by the minute, so after 30 minutes of this, I opened the door to face her. She began scolding me right away for not being designated godmother and not being invited to the christening. We got into a furious disagreement when I informed her that I had already made up my mind and that she couldn't change it. She made an effort to clarify that she was only attempting to support Lisa because it was clear that she was going through a very tough time. "At least you had your doctor friends by your side," my mother said. However, Lisa's friends had expressly advised her not to date that guy, so she was unable to even discuss her problems with them. All she had to talk to was me, and she was struggling greatly. She moved in with me for that reason. She couldn't stand being by herself. Instead of being so cold and selfish, you ought to have been more understanding as the older sister. What I was hearing was unbelievable. I informed her that I felt no pity for Lisa because she was solely to blame, and I felt even less pity for my mother because she had taken the decision to not support me throughout my labor. In addition, she broke her pledge to assist me in the last few weeks of my pregnancy. I could hear my kid crying inside before the conflict got out of hand. I informed my mother that I couldn't waste time arguing with her about her bad decisions since I had to look after my son. Before I called security, I told her to leave and shut the door in her face. After a while, she left, but things continued after that. Since then, a number of my co-workers at the hospital have informed me that my mother has been disparaging me on social media, calling me egotistical and nasty, even though I have blocked her. Others have emailed me screenshots, which I have seen. She wrote in one post, "Despite my best efforts to be a good mother to both of my girls, I suppose some people are unable to understand that I can't be everywhere at once. Being cut off from my granddaughter's life is my punishment for choosing to be there for the daughter who had no one else." She said, "My heart breaks for Lisa," in another post, expressing her continued hope that her sister would comprehend the pain she was experiencing. Although Lisa feels bad for causing me to miss the birth of my first grandchild, she is not the issue. I wish some individuals weren't so narcissistic and egotistical that they can't even comprehend the suffering of their sister. The most recent one really got to me. Karma always comes back around. We'll see how you feel when you're a mother going through this yourself. You have my forgiveness for everything, since children are capable of selfishness. A mother, however, cannot be. A number of family members have contacted me, advising me to simply speak with Lisa and Mom and attempt to comprehend their perspective. Some members of my extended family have even begun to comment on my mother's postings about how I'm destroying the family and share them themselves. I want to see things from a different point of view, even if I don't think I've done anything wrong. I am aware that the stress of returning to work in the emergency room, together with pregnancy and new parenthood, might make you more emotional and irritable, while taking care of a baby isn't beneficial. When my mother put the drama of my sister's 2-week romance ahead of the arrival of her grandson, I can't help but believe that she made her decision apparent. Every day as physicians, we are taught to make tough choices, some of which require balancing conflicting goals. That night, my mother made a decision as well, and she must now deal with the fallout. I've made the decision to put my kid in a stable, drama-free home with folks who have shown they will truly be there for us when we need them. Update 1. I've given this problem a lot of consideration, considering all potential outcomes. In light of my previous post and the events that followed, I would want to explain my viewpoint and discuss how things have changed since then. My mom's social media effort has intensified. I want to share the precise posts she's made because several of you wanted to see what was being stated. Her first post read, "I've done all in my ability to be a good mother to both my girls, but I guess some people simply can't realize that I can't be everywhere at once. So I opted to be there for the daughter who had no one else by her side when she was coping with the worst type of heartache. I guess that makes me the biggest villain in the world. But what does that make the daughter who cut me out of her life over something so small and petty and didn't even allow me to be part of my granddaughter's christening? The word would be heartless." A few hours after the first post, the second one was published. Even with everything that has transpired, my heart still hurts for Lisa. Although I know it's futile, she continues to hope that perhaps my other daughter will be understanding and try to understand what she was going through. I know Lisa isn't the issue, but she doesn't want to be the reason I never get to be my first granddaughter's godmother. All I want is for her to realize that and quit holding herself responsible for whatever has occurred. Additionally, I wish that some people would stop being so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. Yesterday was the most recent. Karma always gets back at you. I will forgive you for everything, and I will see you when you experience this as a mother. For a mother cannot be selfish, but a child can. In addition to these significant posts, she has been posting innumerable depressing sayings about the challenges of motherhood and responding to inquiries from people who want to know what's going on. She has gone to considerable lengths to paint me as the antagonist and explain every detail of the drama. I handle actual crises on a daily basis as an emergency physician. I find it not only offensive but almost comical when my mother and family members attempt to portray my sister's 2-week relationship drama as some sort of serious crisis that excused her from attending her grandchild's birth. I've received constant messages from a number of my aunts and uncles accusing me of being needlessly harsh towards my mother and sister. One aunt even suggested that I should get help before I permanently harm my relationship with my family, because my stubbornness might be the result of postpartum depression. Additionally, I've received messages from members of my extended family who I haven't spoken to in years, and they are all suddenly very knowledgeable about my family's dynamics. They keep talking about how supportive my mother was during my pregnancy, conveniently ignoring the fact that her assistance mostly took the form of visits and comments on social media. Whenever she felt like it, I'm even more sure of my choice now that I've read all of their messages and seen my mother's posts. That night, my mother made her decision. Her daughter going into labor was not as important to her as my sister's romantic disappointment. The facts won't change, no matter how hard she tries to change the story. I will refrain from participating in their social media drama. I'm not going to post my side of the story or try to defend myself to relatives who have already made up their minds. My focus needs to be on my daughter and my career. I have 12-hour shifts in the ER to manage while taking care of a newborn. I don't have time or energy for people who only want to create more stress in my life. Maria and Kelly have been incredible throughout all of this. They've been taking turns checking in on us, bringing meals, and even offering to watch the baby when I need to rest between shifts. These are the kind of people I want in my daughter's life. People who show up when it matters, not just when it's convenient. So no, I don't think I'm being heartless or cruel. I'm being realistic about who I can count on and who I can't. My mother made her decision, and I've made mine. Update 2: about a week has passed since my last post, and things have escalated significantly. Now that I haven't responded to any of my mother's social media posts, I guess she realized she wasn't getting the reaction she wanted from her online drama campaign. This morning she decided to pay me another visit, but this time she brought Lisa with her. I was at home trying to get my daughter to nap after a particularly long night shift at the ER when they showed up unannounced through the door. They said they wanted to apologize, but I was in no mood for another confrontation. I knew that even if I opened the door and they apologized, they would eventually want to clear the air, which would mean rehashing everything that had happened. I didn't have the emotional or physical energy for that. I told them through the door that I was busy with my daughter and had just put her down for a nap. I explained that I wasn't in the right state of mind for a conversation right now, and if they genuinely wanted to apologize, they would have to do it later. When I was actually free to talk, I tried to be as polite as possible, knowing that if I was rude, they might start yelling and wake my daughter. But I shouldn't have bothered trying to keep things civil because they started yelling anyway. They began berating me about how disrespectful I was being because they had driven all the way here, and I had refused to even open the door to let them in. For the record, I hadn't asked them to do any of that. My mother started shouting about how I was tearing the family apart and how I was using my daughter as a weapon against her. Lisa chimed in with how I was being selfish and dramatic about the whole situation. They kept getting louder and louder, completely disregarding the fact that there was a sleeping baby inside. When I heard my daughter starting to stir and fuss through the baby monitor, something in me snapped. I opened the door and told them in no uncertain terms that if they didn't get off my property right that instant, I would call the police and file for a restraining order. They looked shocked, probably because they hadn't expected me to fight back. My mother tried to argue, saying I was overreacting and that she had rights as a grandmother. But Lisa at least seemed to understand that I was serious about my threat and wasn't just saying it for intimidation. She started trying to pull our mother away even as she was being dragged away. My mother didn't stop. She kept cursing at me, calling me names and saying things like, You'll regret this when you need my help, and you can't keep my granddaughter from me forever." Lisa, while pulling her away, was also muttering about how I was always like this and how I never could handle things like a normal person. I didn't call the police this time because I didn't want to take such a drastic step, but I've decided that if they show up again, I won't hesitate. This isn't just about me anymore. Their behavior is now affecting my daughter. When I went back inside, she was fully awake and crying from all the commotion. I've already notified my building security about the incident and given them my mother and sister's descriptions. I've also documented everything that happened today, including the time and what was said, in case I do need to pursue legal action in the future. At this point, I wouldn't put it past my mother to try something else. To be clear, I'm not preventing them from seeing my daughter because I'm being petty about what happened during my labor. I'm keeping them away because they've consistently shown that they don't respect boundaries and will prioritize their own feelings over my daughter's well-being. Today was just the latest example of that. At least their behavior made one thing crystal clear. I'm definitely not like my mother, because while she might not really care about me, I will do whatever it takes to protect my child from toxic behavior, even if that means cutting off family. Update 3. I know I've been missing in action for almost 2 months now since my last post, but I've been incredibly busy with work and my daughter. Life has actually been going pretty well for us. Maria and Kelly dropped by frequently to spend time with my daughter, and I haven't had any direct contact with my mom or Lisa in several weeks. Lisa did keep trying to reach out to me for a few weeks, following the last incident. She created multiple new social media accounts after I blocked her original one, sending messages explaining that even though she had sided with our mom during the confrontation, our mother was really upset about everything that had gone wrong. According to Lisa, because of Mom's age, she was too prideful to admit she was wrong. So Lisa wanted me to somehow make the first move toward reconciliation, so Mom could rebuild a relationship with her granddaughter. I didn't respond to any of her messages. No matter how many she sent, eventually, I guess she got tired of creating new accounts and stopped trying altogether. I'm genuinely grateful that she did because I've made my position clear. If my mother wants me to consider forgiving her, she needs to apologize first. Then maybe I'll consider giving her the opportunity to be a grandmother. But for now, I'm completely content with my life as it is. My schedule at the hospital has settled into a manageable routine. I've been lucky enough to switch to more regular day shifts, which has made caring for my daughter much easier. My colleagues have been incredibly supportive, especially those who are parents themselves. They understand the challenges of balancing medical career demands with single parenthood. Maria and Kelly have become even more involved in our lives. Maria's 3-year-old son has basically appointed himself my daughter's big brother, and it's adorable to watch them interact during our weekend get-togethers. Kelly has been incredible about coordinating her pediatric clinic schedule to handle all my daughter's checkups and vaccinations. Personally, the contrast between their consistent support and my mother's behavior couldn't be more stark. While my friends have naturally integrated themselves into our daily lives, my mother and sister seem to think that dramatic gestures and emotional manipulation are the way to build relationships. They still don't understand that trust is earned through reliable, consistent behavior, not grand shows of emotion when it's convenient for them. Some of our relatives have finally started to back off as well. I think they've realized that I'm serious about maintaining these boundaries. A few have even reached out to apologize for getting involved in the situation without understanding the full context. One of my aunts, who initially sided with my mother, recently admitted that she's noticed similar patterns of behavior from Mom in other family situations. My daughter is thriving in our peaceful environment. She's hitting all her developmental milestones right on schedule, and Kelly assures me she's perfectly healthy. The stability of our current routine seems to suit her well. We have a solid support system in place with my friends and colleagues, and I found that I don't miss the drama that my mother and sister brought into our lives. Sometimes I wonder if my mother realizes that she's missing out on watching her granddaughter grow up, not because I'm being vindictive, but because she couldn't prioritize her daughter's needs during one of the most critical moments in life. She chose to focus on Lisa's minor romantic disappointment over being present for the birth of her grandchild, and that decision revealed everything about her priorities. The irony isn't lost on me that while my mother claims I'm using my daughter as a weapon, she's the one who tried to use my pregnancy and her role as a grandmother to repair our relationship, but only on her terms. She wanted all the privileges of being a grandmother without any of the actual support or responsibility that role entails. I've learned a lot about motherhood in these past few months, and one thing has become crystal clear. Being a mother means showing up when your child needs you, not just when it's convenient or when you want something. My mother's actions during my pregnancy and labor showed me exactly what kind of grandmother she would be. Someone who would always prioritize her own needs. And Lisa's drama over my daughter's well-being. For now, I'm focusing on building the kind of stable, loving environment that I want my daughter to grow up in. We're surrounded by people who have consistently proven their loyalty and support. My daughter might have fewer biological family members in her life, but she has something more valuable: adults who can be counted on to put her needs first. The door isn't permanently closed. If my mother ever genuinely acknowledges her behavior and offers a sincere apology, I would consider carefully reintegrating her into our lives. But I won't hold my breath waiting for that to happen, and I won't compromise on my daughter's emotional well-being. In the meantime, sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for your child is to protect them from toxic family dynamics, even if that means keeping distance from your own mother.